It is serious concern of GST tax evasion, which is causing erosion of economy. Today's major concern is about evasion of GST tax even though the tax mechanism is operating through electronic media. The very purposes of the tax mechanism through electronic media have involved two aspects: 1. Ease of doing business for taxpayers, and 2. Tap the source who indulged in tax evasion. Though it is fulfilling the first criterion of ease of doing business for taxpayers, but somehow it is missing the second part, which is causing the huge tax evasions, particularly to the cases where input tax credit is involved. It is also seen that in such scenario following are key areas of concern, that is disappearing suppliers, cheated by the supplier who passed on input tax credit, disallowance of input tax credit, etc. With rapid growth of economy, it must be appreciated that the tax evaders are always on toes to outsmart the department with their pace. In other words, they get the time-lagging benefit of being caught to win the race. Therefore, being a bona fide taxpayer, it is our duty to help the department to get hold such evaders and should avoid such evaders who are putting us in trouble. Recent trend to cause tax evasion. GST is system-based tax compliance. So, methodology of evasion appears to have also changed drastically. In central excise or service tax regime, evasion through SENVAT credit and disappearance of taxpayers thereafter were not seen frequently. However, in today's context, the evasion against aforesaid modalities is seen very often. It must be appreciated that the GST tax base is substantially very high. However, the workforce is not even adequate to match the pace of evasion or aggression of the evaders. So, it needs or requires first-hand online verification of details submitted by the taxpayers and compliance thereof by the system only without any human interferences, as it is said that the prevention is always better than cure. Cure includes audit and preventive teams who are available for thorough investigation later on. To curb the problems, government used to take various measures, but the evaders move one step ahead of that to succeed in their ulterior motive to evade taxes. Government-wide Notification Number 01/2021, Central Tax File Number CBEC 20/06/04/2020, GST dated 1st January 2021 tried to streamline the situation, which caused substantial reduction but still not under control. The said notification says, 2. In the Central Goods and Services Tax Rules, 2017, hereafter in this notification referred to as the said rules, in Rule 59, after Subrule 5, the following subrule shall be inserted, namely, 6. Notwithstanding anything contained in this rule, a registered person shall not be allowed to furnish the details of outward supplies of goods or services or both under Section 37 in Form GSTR 1, if he has not furnished the return in Form GSTR 3B for preceding 2 months, b. A registered person required to furnish return for every quarter under the proviso to subsection 1 of Section 39 shall not be allowed to furnish the details of outward supplies of goods or services or both under Section 37 in Form GSTR 1 or using the invoice furnishing facility, if he has not furnished the return in Form GSTR 3B for preceding tax period, and c. A registered person who is restricted from using the amount available in electronic credit ledger to discharge his liability towards tax in excess of 99%. of such tax liability under Rule 86B shall not be allowed to furnish the details of outward supplies of goods or services or both under Section 37 in Form GSTR 1 or using the invoice furnishing facility, if he has not furnished the return in Form GSTR 3B for preceding tax period. Not only this, but the GST law also made mandatory to have bank AC number for business transaction under GST. But the implementation thereof is not being followed religiously. Plethora of judgments are in favor of the taxpayers on the question of credit of taxes paid on supplies, as the department could not substantiate that the recipient was having willful intention to evade the taxes and they were part and parcel of such evasion. It is due to either the evader is vanished or nexus between the taxpayer and evader could not be established. Therefore, the issue is not only catch such evaders, but also to withhold the input tax credit before it is too late. It must be appreciated that law has given the credit facility of tax to the taxpayer since the said input tax had been deposited to the government. So first, we must understand the documents and information flow therefrom from supplier to recipients, and then control section therefore. It is also seen that on being caught by the department, the registered person is only small vendors or villager or laborer or any other person who has no capacity to even run a business. Such fellow has provided their IDs to third person against easy money. But the actual person behind the scene is one of the operator who may be difficult to tap, but cannot be impossible. It should be understood that the certain information is available on common portal. There are two parts. First is the supplier, who submit details of supplies in GSTR 1, that is, GSTR 1 filed by the supplier, pays taxes by adjusting from input tax credit ledger and or cash credit ledger. After cut-off date, the reflection of such details of GSTR 1 of supplier are reflected in GSTR 2 of recipients. Second part is of recipient, who has details of supplies of GSTR 1 appears in GSTR 2, recipient files GSTR 1 for the supplied made during the month, and recipient pays taxes by adjusting from input tax credit ledger and or cash credit ledger. Relevant documents that are available on common portal can be used for the purposes of curb to evasion. The following documents have major role to play in supply chain of supplier and recipients. First document is GSTR 1, which is entry level of invoice where liability of taxpayer as well as availability of input tax credit to the recipient is determined. It also determines that whether any credit notes or debit notes have been issued by the taxpayer or recipient as the case may be. So, this is most crucial documents for the GST collection. Second document is GSTR 2, which is entry level for availability of input tax credit. It gets reflection from GSTR 1 of the taxpayer who supplied the goods or services to them. It is crucial document for adjustment of tax payable by the recipient. The third document is GSTR 3, which contains details of tax liability and tax paid, either through input tax credit or through cash. It is crucial document for adjustment of tax payable by the recipient. Having said so, by now it must be clear that these documents are crucial as well as relevant for the supplier, recipient and department. The bona fide intention of the taxpayers towards GST law compliance are dependent on efforts undertaken by them. In this regard, certain suggestions are there which taxpayer as well as the system may undertake to prevent probable evasion. Although Aadhaar is personal documents, But when used in business purposes, then the recipient of supplies may ensure to keep the copy of virtual Aadhaar card of supplier to ensure that the supplier is genuine and they had taken the preliminary precaution. As PAN card details already part of GST, so it may not be insisted upon. I know it would be difficult to take all the time from each supplier, but can be possible when the supplier receives big or continuous order for certain period, and also the supplier shall be not disclosing the actual Aadhaar number. So supplier may also not be having problem in providing such virtual Aadhaar number. Presently, recipient do not have any mechanism to know whether the supplier is tax compliant for the supply of the particular month or not. Therefore, it can be undertaken in two ways. 1. Details of supply through GSTR 1 of the supplier should not be allowed to auto-populate the GSTR 2 of the recipients unless tax compliance of the supplier have been scrutinized by the system. 2. The recipient must be alarmed for such non-compliance so that the recipient would ensure tax compliance by the supplier. Supply chain, at least of one tier upward or downward, must be under system scrutiny with 24/7 facility. Any anomaly must be automatically notified to the concerned ranges of supply recipient immediately by the system itself, that is GSTN portal itself. Delay in passing information would continue to cause leakage of revenue. It must be made mandatory for the taxpayer to provide bank details, and if the taxpayer failed to provide any bank details within specified period, presently 1 month, the GST number should be blocked by the system. Tax payable as determined in GSTR 1 should be auto-populated in GSTR 3 of the supplier along with input tax credit availability. GSTR 2 and GSTR 3 for the purpose of adjustment of input tax credit should be auto-populated. In other words, the taxpayer should not be allowed to enhance or reduce the input credit amount in GSTR 3. Is deterrent action required under GST? Reply is affirmative as to when looking into the base size of taxpayers under GST. It would not be out of place to mention that the tax base is mammoth and is growing. Therefore, it would be humanly impossible to keep check on data of such mammoth size and wherefrom digging out the evaders detail at pace of 24x7 basis. The evasion not only have impact on GST revenue but also have impact on income tax also. With rapid growth of economy, consumption of lots of time to find evasion, revenue being backbone of the country, therefore law should also think for having more deterrent action other than financial punishment or prosecution under law. Suggestion is also that they should not be allowed to do business anymore, and the GSTN should inform the details of Aadhaar number of such disappearing taxpayers to UIAD for suspending and or cancelling the Aadhaar so that such taxpayers should be debarred to do business in future also, as well as deterring them from their all rights in India unless they come forward. Such action may be taken through some screening committee comprising of CBIC and CBDT. With this, I conclude the video, leaving you to think about the efforts required to be taken for curbing the evasion. Thanks.